August 12th, the year 2000, the Barents Sea. The pride of the Russian Navy is running a practice attack with 118 men on board. At 11:30 Moscow time, seismic needles jump in 3 countries. Something inside the Russian fleet's exercise area has just exploded. 2 minutes and 10 seconds later, they jump again, harder. The second blast is picked up in Canada and in Alaska. The submarine they called Unsinkable is on the bottom, and in her 9th compartment, 23 men are still alive in the dark, waiting for a rescue. For the next 9 days, Russia tells the world a story. Radio contact, air being pumped down, a rescue closing in. Almost none of it is true. When it is over, Moscow will say the crew died instantly. Then divers will bring up a dead officer with 2 soaked pages in his pocket. Pages that prove the men lived for hours and that the story was a lie. This is the black box breakdown of the submarine Kursk. This is black box breakdown. Russia said they died instantly. They didn't. Chapter 1, the boat they called Unsinkable. In the last years of the Cold War, the Soviet Union built a class of submarine for exactly one job, killing American aircraft carriers. NATO called the class Oscar II. Each one ran near silent and stretched 154 meters, about 2 jumbo jets, nose to tail. Under the outer casing sat a second, thicker hull, and inside that, 9 watertight compartments. Her designers claimed a boat like this could survive a direct torpedo hit. The press called her unsinkable. This is her sister ship, Oral. Same class, same yard. The Kursk herself was welded together at Severodvinsk, commissioned in December 1994, and named after the greatest tank battle of the Second World War. Her main weapon was the Granite, a cruise missile the size of a small aircraft, 24 of them in angled tubes between the 2 hulls. This is a real launch, filmed aboard her sister ship Tomsk. In 1999, under Captain Gennady Lyakin, the Kursk shadowed the American 6th Fleet in the Mediterranean during the Kosovo War. She came home celebrated as the best boat in the Northern Fleet. According to post-disaster reporting, her officers disabled the emergency rescue buoy on that same deployment, afraid it might pop loose and betray her position to the Americans. It was never rearmed. Chapter 2, a Navy running on empty. Her home was Vidyayevo, a crumbling garrison town above the Arctic Circle. By 1998, sailors on Russia's nuclear submarines were going months without pay. The fleet around her was dissolving. In the 5 years after the Soviet collapse, the Navy lost roughly half its ships, and over 100 nuclear submarines sat rotting at their moorings. The rescue force went first. The dedicated rescue mother submarines were scrapped in the 90s, and the Navy's best deep rescue vehicles had sat in a St. Petersburg yard since '94, waiting for repair money. What remained were 2 aging Priz rescue capsules. This is the exact type, and a surface rescue ship that was really a 20-year-old converted lumber carrier. And in her bow, the Kursk carried a bargain from another era, the Type 65 torpedo. 10.7 meters long, 5 tons, and driven by high-test peroxide. The Royal Navy had abandoned peroxide torpedoes back in 1955 after one blew up inside the submarine Sidon and killed 13 men. Most Western navies followed. Russia kept them. The range was cheap. The practice torpedo aboard came from a batch of 10 made in 1990. 6 of the 10 had been rejected for faulty welding. Practice weapons, investigators later wrote, simply got less scrutiny. Her crew had never fired one. Their last live torpedo shot, 3 years earlier, used a simpler battery weapon. The investigation later found their peroxide training was never verified, and some training log signatures were faked. Then, in August of 2000, the Northern Fleet gathered for its biggest exercise since the Soviet Union fell. More than 30 warships, with the Kursk given the starring role. She sailed on August 10th, the 27th birthday of Dmitri Kolesnikov, the officer who ran her turbines. At home, he left his dog tag, his crucifix, and a poem for his new wife. Chapter 3, 2 minutes and 10 seconds. August 12th, the fleet spreads across the Barents Sea and the flagship, the giant battlecruiser Peter the Great takes station as the Kursk's practice target. At 8:51 that morning, the Kursk asks permission to fire. Fleet Control answers with a single word. Dobro. Good. It is the last word anyone will ever send her. Investigators would conclude that inside torpedo tube 4, peroxide was seeping through a faulty weld. On contact with metal, it decomposes, expanding 5,000 times over. An unstoppable chemistry her crew was never trained to fight. This is the actual seismic record. At 11:29 Moscow time, the torpedo's fuel explodes. Magnitude 1.5, roughly 100 kilograms of high explosive. The Kursk keeps moving. Fire is now loose in her bow. For the next 2 minutes and 10 seconds, the Kursk keeps driving forward, carrying that fire toward the rest of her torpedoes. Then the second trace. Magnitude 3.5, an estimated 5 to 7 warheads detonating together. It is picked up in Finnmark, in Spitsbergen, in Canada, and in Alaska. None of this rests on Russian data. It sits in an official Norwegian government report. First explosion, 7:29 and 50 seconds, Greenwich time, strength 1.5. The second, quote, much larger explosion, 3.5. Aboard Peter the Great, sonar operators hear the detonation and the crew feels the hull shudder. They report it. The report is dismissed and the exercise sails on. The blast has gutted the first 4 compartments and everyone inside them. The Kursk plows bow first into the clay, 108 meters down, and goes still. One system works exactly as designed. Both nuclear reactors sense the catastrophe and shut themselves down. The engineers who built those reactors saved the Barents Sea. Nothing saved the bow. Chapter 4, 23 Men Aft. In the stern, past the reactors, 23 men are still alive. Survivors from 3 compartments grope through the dark to compartment 9, the one with the escape hatch. Above them, 108 meters of near-freezing water. A free ascent from that depth, without surface support, is close to a death sentence. They choose to wait for rescue. The fleet doesn't know. The Kursk's firing window closes at 1:30 in the afternoon. Silence. And for hours, nobody treats the silence as an emergency. Not until 11 that night, close to 12 hours after the explosions, does the Northern Fleet finally declare an alert and stop the exercise. And by then, the men in compartment 9 had already started writing down exactly what was happening to them. We know, because of what divers would find in October. Chapter 5, What Moscow Said. What happened next is best told side by side. What Moscow said out loud, against what the record now shows was true, hour by hour. Monday, 2 days later, the Navy finally speaks. It says there were, quote, minor technical difficulties. It says the accident happened on Sunday. It happened on Saturday. The Navy says it is in radio contact with the crew. There had been no radio contact since Dobro. Not one transmission before or after the blasts. It says air is being pumped down to the survivors. Nothing had ever docked with the wreck. That night, the rescuers were still just filming it. It says rescuers can hear tapping, an SOS, spelling the word water. Investigators would later conclude the recorded taps did not come from the Kursk at all. The families dispute that to this day. And the new president, 3 months into the job, stays on vacation in Sochi. State television shows him hosting a barbecue, roughly a day after his best submarine went silent. He would say of it later, I probably should have returned to Moscow, but nothing would have changed. Even the military's own newspaper printed a warning about peroxide torpedoes, and overnight, the piece was replaced with speculation about a foreign collision. Chapter 6, The Rescue That Wasn't. The real rescue looked like this. On the second night, the capsule AS-34 found the wreck by crashing into it. The impact damaged the capsule. It tried again and again to lock onto the escape hatch and failed every time. Batteries died mid-attempt. Crews stripped its sister capsule for parts. Storms shut everything down for hours. Moscow's explanations are preserved in the Norwegian report. Bad weather, a damaged hatch, and a 60-degree lean of the hull. When the wreck was finally surveyed, the lean measured about 1.5 degrees. Meanwhile, Britain had already loaded this, the LR5 rescue submersible, onto a ship, and Norway had deep saturation divers standing by. 6 countries offered to help. Russia said no. Day after day, for 5 days, while the tapping story ran on television, the offers sat refused. On August 17th, Moscow finally said yes. This ship, the Normand Pioneer, was already steaming north with the LR5 aboard. She arrived on the evening of the 19th. Norwegian divers went down from the Seaway Eagle on the 20th and reached the hatch Moscow had called too damaged to open. They opened it the next morning with minimal difficulty. Behind it, compartment 9 was flooded to the ceiling. 9 days after the explosions, the rescue was over before it ever began. That evening, the fleet commander, Admiral Popov, went on television, removed his cap, and asked the mothers of Russia to forgive him for not bringing back their boys. The British commander who brought the LR5 chose his words carefully years later. Given permission immediately, quote, "Maybe we could have been attempting a rescue about 3 days earlier." Chapter 7, Vidyayevo. Through all of it, the families were here. Vidyayevo, the closed garrison town the Kursk called home, being told, day after day, that the men below were breathing. At a briefing, Nadezhda Tylik, the mother of a lieutenant on board, stood up screaming at the officials. On camera, a nurse injected her with a sedative through her coat. She was carried out mid-sentence. Her husband said he had asked for it. Months later, she said that was a lie told to protect her. In her words, "The injection was done to shut my mouth." On August 22nd, the president finally came north. These are the Kremlin's own photographs. Inside the officers' club, 400 people, a meeting that ran for hours, and a room full of fury. Mothers and widows screamed over him. 2 journalists smuggled inside heard one question again and again: "Why have you murdered our lads?" He promised each family 10 years of an officer's salary, housing, and education for the children. The state paid. The questions, it never really answered. The next day, he answered questions on state television, calm and controlled. This is that actual interview. 2 weeks later, on American television, Larry King asked him what happened to the submarine. He paused, gave a small smile, and answered, "It sank." Chapter 8, 2 pages. In late October, a joint Norwegian and Russian dive team went back down to the wreck, this time to bring the men home. Warrant Officer Sergei Shmygin was the first man inside. Among the first 4 bodies raised that day was a captain-lieutenant from the turbine room. In his pocket, 2 folded, water-soaked pages. The first entry is timed 1:15 in the afternoon, written in a steady hand while the emergency lights still worked. All personnel from sections 6, 7 and 8 have moved to section 9. There are 23 of us here. The last entry is scrawled blind, in the dark. It is too dark to write here, but I will try by feel. There is no chance. 10 to 20%. Let's hope that at least someone will read this. Then, for everyone at home, regards to everybody, no need to despair, and a signature, Kolesnikov. Remember what the Deputy Prime Minister had told the world, that almost everyone died before the boat hit the bottom. The note proved 23 men lived for hours. The official story was dead. Forensics filled in the rest. As the oxygen thinned, a chemical air regeneration cartridge touched oily water and flash burned the compartment. Carbon monoxide did the rest. The official finding, they lived 6 to 8 hours at most. The family's lawyer spent years arguing the fleet's own logs said otherwise. Knocking, recorded from the seafloor into the second day. A military court refused to reopen the case. He fled Russia in 2007. A second note came up in November. Its author never officially confirmed. It described the gas and the rising pressure. "We cannot last more than a day." The men's emergency breathing gear, it noted, was stored forward. Forward was gone. Dmitri Kolesnikov was buried in St. Petersburg. Before sailing, he had left Olga a poem. When the hour comes to die, I want time to whisper one thing. My darling, I love you. The Navy never gave Olga the other side of his note, the part written only to her. Her words, there is something in that note they don't want me to see. Chapter 9, The Verdict. A year later, Dutch salvage engineers did what many called impossible. 26 cables, gripped straight through holes cut in the hull, hauled 9,000 tons off the seabed in a single pull. They sawed off the shattered bow and left it on the bottom. The rest came up under the barge Giant 4, the heaviest object ever recovered from that depth. In this dry dock at Roslyakovo, investigators finally walked her decks, and 94 more men came home. In the end, 115 of the 118 were recovered. 3 never were. In July 2002, the Prosecutor General announced the cause. High test peroxide through a faulty weld in torpedo tube 4. Exactly what the seismographs had said from day one. His own report described, quote, stunning breaches of discipline, shoddy, obsolete, and poorly maintained equipment. Then the file was classified. 133 volumes. The public got 4 pages. Criminal charges? None. In the prosecutor's words, those who designed the torpedo couldn't foresee the possibility of its explosion. 14 admirals and officers were removed, officially not as punishment. The counter-story never died, a collision with a NATO submarine shadowing the exercise. One admiral called himself 80% certain. No evidence was ever produced, and the seismic record shows an explosion, not a collision. 21 years later, the same fleet commander repeated it on state media, saying he could name the NATO submarine with 90% probability, while admitting, quote, there is no evidence. Chapter 10, What the Lie Built. One more thing sank with the Kursk. Russia's biggest television channel, run by the oligarch Boris Berezovsky, had covered the disaster without mercy. The barbecue, the refused help, the sedated mother. The president was furious. Television people, he said, who had destroyed the very army and fleet, were now exploiting this misfortune to gain political capital. Within months, Berezovsky was pressured into selling the channel, and his star anchor was taken off the air. Channel 1 became, in effect, the States, the first big domino in the takeover of Russian television. 25 years on, that is how the anniversaries frame this story. Not as an accident, but, in the words of the family's lawyer, as the place where the lies began. In 2009, a scrap dealer near Murmansk noticed something in his yard. The Kursk's actual sail, cut from the wreck and forgotten. The city raised it as a memorial. It stands there now, above the names of her men. To the sailors, the plaque reads, who died in peacetime. Machines fail. That's physics, and you can engineer against it. But almost everything that happened after 11:29 that morning was a choice. And 23 men waited in the dark while those choices were made for them. The front of Kolesnikov's note has been read around the world. The other side, the part written only to his wife, has never been made public. If 9 days of official lies got to you, wait until you see the plane that vanished with 239 people on board and the search that is still empty-handed. That breakdown is on the channel now. Subscribe to Black Box Breakdown.
If this one got under your skin a little, good. That's the point. And it only keeps happening because people like you keep showing up.
So do one thing for me. Hit subscribe. It is free, and it is the whole reason Black Box can keep taking these disasters apart.